The story in 2.6 started off with what seemed to be complete and utter nonsense. It was an amalgamation of memes, monkeys, and ninjas, which, if you're taking this out of context, sounds absolutely unhinged. But true to Star Rail's story pattern, what seemed like a completely absurd storyline quickly changed into one of human experimentation, insane scientists, and even planet-wide genocide. More importantly though, we learned a little bit more about Dr. Primitive, and might even have a better idea about what his actual goals are, and it's kinda related to monkeys. So in this video, we are going to talk about the events of the 2.6 story and everything we know about the 64th member of the Genius Society. Before we discuss Dr. Primitive in more detail, if you are interested in more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Since I'll be referencing a lot of the 2.6 story, it goes without saying that there will be a few spoilers in this video. So if you haven't played it yet, then I'd suggest you do that first and then come back to this video later. Before we get into the theoretical parts of the video, let's first talk about Dr. Primitive, as you have likely heard of his name before but might not know too much about him. Dr. Primitive is one of the members of the Genius Society, a group of exceptionally intelligent individuals handpicked by the Eon of Erudition themselves. While most members are scholars or scientists who are pretty neutral or even on the side of good, there are some who have a more infamous reputation. Dr. Primitive is one of the latter and is the typical ends justify the means type of person. Because of his complete disregard for the lives of practically everyone else, he is responsible for the destruction of multiple civilizations across several planets. He is considered a criminal in most places, so much so that he is actively pursued by the Galaxy Rangers, a group who follow the hunt and are functionally space vigilantes, exacting justice and destroying evil wherever they find it. While we don't know every bad thing he has done, one of the reasons he is considered such a dangerous person is due to his atavistic experiments. These experiments essentially involve forcibly devolving the inhabitants of a planet back to their more ancient ancestors. So for humans, this essentially means they are turned back into apes or monkeys. The reason he does this is supposedly to allow humanity or whatever species he carries out the experiment on to rediscover and tread a different path towards scientific enlightenment. Dr. Primitive and his followers believe that most civilizations have stagnated as far as their pursuit of knowledge is concerned. To him, this means that these civilizations have branched off into the wrong direction and thus not able to fully realize their innate potential. The atavistic experiments function as a reset button, allowing these civilizations to have another go at achieving their full potential. As you might have guessed though, turning a functioning society back into their primordial ancestors isn't a good idea. Any evolved species that regresses back to a time when using tools was considered to be genius-level intelligence can't function within their modern society, and thus their civilizations inevitably fall. So the immediate effect of this experiment is often the complete destruction of a society and planet, and why Dr. Primitive is considered an extremely dangerous criminal. Despite being branded as a criminal, some sources suggest that Dr. Primitive actually enjoys being pursued, as he has never actually been captured. It's likely the thrill of staying one step ahead of his pursuers and outsmarting them that feeds his ego of being a super genius. This overinflated ego is likely why he feels his actions are above reproach. No one is at his level of intelligence, save for perhaps the other members of the Genius Society, so why bother wasting time explaining or justifying his actions? When compared to the rest of the universe, Dr. Primitive's intelligence is very likely far above the average person, with even the Intelligentsia Guild having trouble figuring out his technology. In comparison to the other members of the Genius Society though, he's not really that much of an outlier, even if we take into account the planet-level genocide he often carries out. Most of them have done crazier things. I mean, Polka Kakamon is not a stranger to a murder or two, and Rupert is responsible for far more deaths than Dr. Primitive, at least as far as we know. So as dangerous as he is to the general public, he fits in quite well among the other unhinged geniuses of the Genius Society. Now, despite talking about his exploits and basically running through his resume, we haven't really talked about why he's doing any of this. Just to be clear, most of what I'll discuss from this point forward are mostly just theories. As I mentioned earlier, the reason for why he is regressing different civilizations is because he believes that they have intellectually stagnated. His experiments are meant to reset these civilizations, allowing them another crack at intellectual discovery and attaining knowledge. We are told that the reason he does this is so that every living being is able to fulfill their full potential. This could very well be his primary motivation, but we kinda learn of this more through the interpretations and actions of his followers rather than the Doctor himself, so there could be alternative reasons behind his actions. One such alternative is that perhaps he is trying to rekindle Noose's interest in the universe. Through the simulated universe, we learn that the Eon of Erudition has pretty much stopped all of their computations and calculations, and we don't really know why this has happened. Perhaps they found the answer they were looking for, or maybe the question they are trying to solve just has no answer, so they gave up. During Rappa's flashback, however, we hear the Umbral Headmistress mention that the purpose of the regression or atavistic experiments are to allow civilizations to yet again be imbued with endless possibilities. She specifically says that this will allow erudition to shine upon the universe with its kaleidoscopic rays once more. While this might just be an overly fancy or abstract way of saying they want the universe to have a new sense of discovery when it comes to the pursuit of knowledge, what if this is actually a more literal thing? Perhaps Noose no longer casts its gaze on the universe and humanity because humanity's civilizations have already stagnated scientifically. No new significant discovery has taken place, and the knowledge singularity is moving further and further away. What if all of this effort is just so Dr. Primitive can feel the gaze of their Eon once more? An Eon that has grown tired and dispassionate with the discoveries of humanity. By regressing every living creature back to their ancestral or primordial roots, discovery and erudition could once more shine on the universe as these creatures rediscover science and technology. What I'm saying is that all of this effort on Dr. Primitive's part is an attempt at getting Noose to notice them once more. It's literally just notice me senpai bullshit. Much like how Dr. Primitive's own researchers wish and clamor for his attention, he in turn wishes for the attention of his own god, the god of erudition. A devout follower wanting the attention of their god is far more plausible than just wanting to turn people into monkeys so they can rediscover fire again. That being said, at the end of the day, Dr. Primitive is still a genius among geniuses. And much like other geniuses, they don't often revere gods or beings that claim to be above them. Those that practice science often use their knowledge and abilities to achieve their own goals rather than rely on a divine being's benevolence. Plus, given his ego, it's unlikely he would ever admit everything he has achieved is purely through divine providence. And therein lies the secondary possibility. In the 2.6 story, we are given a bit of an explanation on the history of bananas in the Star Rail universe. As weird as that sounds, this story might actually give us a hint at what Dr. Primitive is trying to achieve. You see, we are told that in the Star Rail universe, there was once a species of banana that was genetically created in a lab. This species had very desirable traits, making it far more in demand than other more naturally occurring variants. Mass production and cultivation ultimately allowed this particular strain of banana to spread across the entire universe. However, because they were all genetically similar, all it took was one single strain of virus to wipe out the entire population. What was once a very sought-after banana variant now no longer exists. But why am I telling you this story? So far, we are told that Dr. Primitive's atavistic experiments is meant to spur intellectual rediscovery. But what if this isn't the case? What if Primitive sees humanity, or any other civilization for that matter, similar to the bananas, in that we are evolutionarily stunted? There is no room for further growth or evolution as science and technology has supplanted the need for biological advancement. What if Primitive is trying to create the ultimate being? That seems a little bit different from what we have learned so far, right? But then you learn about Rappa's past. If you play the 2.6 story, you'd know that she was an experiment, one that was given enhanced strength, senses, and intelligence. But why would Primitive's followers do this? If his goal was to spur intellectual rediscovery, why even attempt to create someone like Rappa? I think the regression experiment might have more than one purpose, or perhaps an alternative one. Yes, on one hand, it might be to reset the universe, allowing civilization to begin anew, but on the other hand, perhaps he wants everything to re-experience evolution. It's possible that what he is attempting to do is to create an ultimate being or species by forcing as many civilizations as possible to undergo evolution all over again, so that one may rise to be the apex predator of the universe. Now, why he might be interested in doing this is really anyone's guess. Perhaps he himself wants to attain such a form, or maybe it's just out of intellectual curiosity. Or maybe, given the rumors of his presence in the device IX, he is preparing the universe for a threat that has yet to come. The thing is, we just don't know. These ideas could just be pieces of a much grander plan, one that we have not yet been privy to, or maybe none of these have any real purpose. Perhaps Dr. Primitive is doing these things not because there is an overarching plan, but because he can. Plus, remember that this is just one of Dr. Primitive's experiments, and he has countless others that don't relate to human genetic modification or evolutionary regression. I mean, the guy is even involved in arms dealing. In truth, we might never actually know, as we are only at the very start of the hunt for Dr. Primitive. Much like the other Genius Society members, their true goals, motivations, and stories are likely to be revealed only much later. Whether Primitive is trying to gain the attention of his god, or perhaps trying to become one himself, is not something we can say for sure at this very moment, but for now, this will have to suffice. Do you think these theories are plausible, or do you have an idea of your own? Share what you think Primitive is really doing in the comments below. If you found the video entertaining, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.